happens every 10 years. Like, when does anybody think about that? Like, if something happens every 10 years, well, tonight we're talking about something that only happens every 10 years. I'm excited about to talk about something that takes 10 years to talk about again. So, there's so many things I talk about every single day and every single year, but there's only one thing. Well, maybe there's more than one thing, but there's this thing that takes 10 years to talk about. So that means we got to live with our decision tonight. Whatever decisions we're going to make, we got to live with them for 10 whole years. And we've got the czar of the census who's going to be able to help us understand what that means to live with 10 years of our decisions. 10 years.
No pressure.
Time. You ready, Julie Menin? You're going to get introduced in just a moment. But boy, do we all look forward to hearing how you can keep us on the right track, get us motivated, because we are going to have to deal with this. And, I don't want to be that resident in Harlem going, oh man, I wish we would have done this. We could have had that and all this other stuff. Let's get it done tonight. Let's get it done tonight. I know Julie Menin has good news, but she also has a real challenge. So that's why I'm so excited and ready to get moving. So let me introduce myself. I'm Clayton Banks. I'm the CEO of Silicon Harlem, and I'm really happy to see the number of people that are coming online and ready to have this wonderful tech talk. The last tech talk we had was with Ben Kalos, the city councilman, who's also running for borough president. But one of the profound topics that he actually talked about with me was education segregation. It was a deep little conversation we had, and he has actually followed up. For those of you who were on that call and remember that, Ben has been aggressively following up on the idea of how that education segregation has moved on to online. So not only do we see education segregation based on the physical nature of public school, but we're now seeing it online, particularly when people don't even have a computer. So there's all types of issues that are being addressed on these tech talks that have real follow-up and real action. And tonight is no exception. We will get there. Let me just give a couple of quick updates of what Silicon Harlem's been doing. And it's been doing a lot, because this pandemic has actually, like, somehow or another, everybody understands what connectivity means. This is what we've been preaching forever. Julie Menin knows I've been talking about this. Bruce and I have been talking about this forever. And now, people are starting to recognize it, and we're very happy about that. What that allowed us to do is we started a rapid response in March before a lot of people realized how dramatic this pandemic was going. We knew right away we had to have a rapid response, and two things that we thought we could try to impact immediately. One was to create an opportunity to get a stockpile of computers, so that we knew that when they would close down the schools, knowing that 40% of people in Harlem do not have broadband in the home, that's a problem. We decided to go ahead and get a stockpile of computers that we could distribute to families that don't have that infrastructure in order for them to stay in touch with the teachers and all of that. And many of the families who may have received one from DOE, some of them don't even speak English and didn't have the information, didn't know the deadlines, didn't know how to get the infrastructure, or have multiple kids in the house. So we're here to help all of them, but we're also here to help senior citizens and vulnerable populations throughout New York City. So in that case, we have things like these Chromebooks. These are real computers, brand new, baby, and we give them out to people. Bing, free. So we do that. Now, what else do? We also are looking at people's health, the health issues that are going on. Of course, Harlem Hospital turns out to be right now one of the epicenters of people who are affected. So we were able to work with another one of our great supporters who put up a tremendous amount of resources to provide us what we call smart thermometers. Smart thermometers, we give them out free. And if anyone on this call needs a thermometer, a smart thermometer, which basically syncs with your Kindle application. Why that's important is because when we see a rise in temperatures of people in a particular cluster or zip code, we can actually identify it and do something about it. So I want anyone who's on this call who needs a smart thermometer or wants to distribute the smart thermometer in your community or in your church or in your places that you visit, please get in touch with us. We've got plenty for you, and we want to make sure everyone is getting a smart thermometer in order to keep things moving. So we also have been working on connectivity where there is none. We are putting up little rapid response broadband solutions. And finally, we are constantly and consistently trying to drive digital literacy to everyone and anyone that needs it. So any of those people, we've had people stop by to get a computer who have never used a computer. And so we sat down and all the way to the point of just showing them how to turn it on. So we focus on that because the more savvy we are in Harlem and particularly in Upper Manhattan and certainly around technology, the more we're going to be successful together, right? So in other words, the more people are digitally literate, things like the census and voting and health and education and everything else will flow right with that. If there's one thing I believe more so than anything is that we all have to have a connection, and that connection will lead to the things. Look at what happened before the pandemic. Do you know the percentage of people that were using telehealth and telemedicine? No more than 15% of the population were dealing with telemedicine and telehealth. That has skyrocketed into the 60s and 70%. And if you don't have the infrastructure, guess what? You're losing. My doctor told me when he told me I had perfect blood pressure, I almost fainted because I've never had it, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm stressed out every day. But when I said, hey, can we talk about all my vitals? He said, no, you got to go online and look at your stuff in the portal. Wow. Right? Luckily, I can do that, but there's a lot of people who can't. So I'm saying all that to say that Silicon Harlem's on the case. We need everybody on board with us. There's plenty of you on this call and others that have devoted time to us to help. And lastly, I'll say this summer, and I don't know if Bruce Lincoln is on or not right now, but this summer we are, and Judy's on the line too, but this summer, everyone, if there's nothing else you don't remember me saying, remember this. We knew that the kids were going to be out of school, and with the threat of the summer youth employment program being at risk, they would not be working. Out of school, not working. Let's redefine pandemic. I mean, that's a problem. So what I'm saying is Silicon Harlem has been able to work with the mayor and others, and we are going to take on 75 students this summer, the most we've ever taken on. We always take students over the summer on an educational journey. This year, we're going to take on 75 students to teach them on how to code, teach them how to become leaders, and all these type of things. So I'm going to need some help. And I hope everyone on this call recognizes what I'm talking about. This is something that's very important. So I'm going to get off that. I have a whole lot more to talk about the next time we get together, but this is just a way to get us started up, get you a quick update on Silicon Harlem. We support everything everybody's doing that's trying to make a difference. And now we've got one of those superstars right here in our midst. And I'm very proud. I've known her for some good time in a couple of different positions that she has had. And one of the things I tell her, and I'll tell anybody else, not only is she a New Yorker, but she ain't scared of nobody on this call. Let me tell you right now, she's not scared of you, not at all. All right, so I know her very well, and she is doing great work in making sure New York City gets counted in a way that we get resources. So let me quickly do a quick introduction. Julie Menin. As an attorney and civic leader, I've got to read some of this stuff. I'd rather just say what I like to say, but I'm going to read some of this stuff. As an attorney and civic leader with over 2 decades of experience in the legal, regulatory, and public sectors, Julie Menin serves as a director, as the director of NYC Census 2020 and as executive assistant corporation counsel at the NYC Law Department. In her current role as NYC Census Director, she is responsible for ensuring that New York City receives its fair share of over $100 billions of dollars in federal funding allocated nationwide, as well as fighting attempts to undercount immigrant and underserved communities. Menin has led 3 New York City agencies, like I said, and previously served as a 7-year chair of Manhattan Community Board 1. Menin was an adjunct professor of law and public policy at Columbia University, from which he graduated, magna cum laude. Woo! My parents, when I graduated high school, they said, oh lordy. But anyway, magna cum laude, Julie Menin, and where she currently serves on the board of trustees at Columbia University. So we got not only someone who's devoted to the city, but she's smart. So we get a good opportunity. Julie, I'm going to let you take it over and give some opening remarks, and we'll get right into Q&A.
Great. Clayton, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate all the leadership that you've provided to the city over many years. It's been wonderful working with you. We've known each other a long time, and I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing. And for having me today. And I also want to thank Nye Whitaker, who is on this call and who's a really important member of our team and doing such great work, making sure we get a proper count and the right count in Harlem. So thank you, Nye. And thank you all for having me today, because I know there are many things that you could be doing. And so I really appreciate you taking a little bit of time to talk with me about the census. And it's not an overstatement what Clayton said. Look, this is once every 10 years. It's a tremendous amount of pressure. It's a tremendous amount of responsibility that each of us have, because we have to make sure that we get this right. Let me just say, in 2010, only 61.9% of New Yorkers filled the census out. That's right, 61.9%. Now, I'm a parent. If my child brought home a 61 on a test, I wouldn't be too pleased. So we should not be too pleased with how we did in 2010. And why am I bringing up 2010? Because it's affecting us right now. COVID is a really stark and unfortunate reminder of why the census matters. If more people would have filled the census out in 2010, we would have more funding right now for our hospitals, for our frontline workers, for PPE. That's why the census matters. And we have a really difficult challenge. We had a challenge before COVID. Let me just say this, the deck has been stacked against New York, and it's been stacked against New York and the census for a long, long time. The census has historically been a tool of oppression. And I'm not going to obviously go through all of the history about why, but we know this to be true. And we know that communities of color in particular have been undercounted. Now, if you look at why I feel the deck is stacked against us, it's partly that, but it's also the Trump administration. They tried illegally and unsuccessfully to add a question to the census that hadn't been on in 70 years. And that question was, are you a U.S. citizen? I also worked for the law department. We were plaintiff on the case. We, along with many others, sued, and we won that case at the Supreme Court. That's the good news. The bad news is that damage, quite honestly, has already been done around the citizenship question, because many people, when they hear the word census, are saying, I'm not going to be bothered with that. I'm not going to fill that out. I don't trust the federal government. I don't want to give them my information. So that's a challenge that we have in New York. And then you overlay that with the fact that for the first time the census is online. This is a real challenge, because obviously, and you all are doing such phenomenal work in this area, a third of New Yorkers lack access to broadband. So to reach them in an online census is challenging at best. And then you put in a global pandemic and the fact that New York City is the epicenter of it. It's obviously, unprecedented challenges. So that is all the challenges that we've dealt. Now, let me say a little bit of good news, and particularly good news for Harlem. So I'm happy to say that all of the communities in Harlem are beating the citywide average, all of them. And that's amazing. So let me just quickly read the statistics. West Harlem is at 57% self-response rate. East Harlem is at 56.7 and Central Harlem is at 55.5. That is better than the city average of 52%. So every community in Harlem is doing better. That is the great news. The other really good news is we as a city are doing better as compared to the country than we did in 2010. So in 2010, we were 14 points behind the national average in self-response. Wow. Remember, the census is a national competition. So we were so far behind, 14 points behind. Right now, we're 9 points behind. So we're still behind, but we're 9 points behind as opposed to 14. So we are catching up to the nation. Now, part of the challenge we have with COVID is that we could not have the 300 pop-up centers with computer terminals that we had planned before COVID. We will be able to have them soon once things fully reopen. But to reach those New Yorkers that lack access to broadband, we've been phone banking, we've been text banking, we've texted 5.6 million New Yorkers using Hustle, a peer-to-peer texting platform. We've phone banked over 600,000 New Yorkers. So we're reaching people. We're also advertising. Hopefully people have seen our ads. We've had a lot of different ads, some celebrity ads like with Cardi B and with Alicia Keys. So hopefully you've seen them on TV. But then we have a lot of ads in digital ads, radio ads. We're advertising in 24 different languages, a lot of different ads that are hopefully resonating. But the challenge really that I wanted to ask all of you, and Clayton and I were talking about this right before we started this, is to ask all of you, well, first of all, if you haven't filled the census out, please just do it while I'm talking. You just go to my2020census.gov, takes a couple minutes, you can be done with it. But please commit on this call to getting 10 New Yorkers that you know this week to fill the census app. Post something on social media about the census. Send a blast email to everyone in your network to urge them to fill the census app. There's nothing like having someone you know say, hey, have you done this? This is really important for our community. It really matters. So there's so much more that I could say about the census. I could literally talk for hours about it. I'm going to pause for a moment and just turn it back over to Clayton to see, does he have any questions for me? Or does anyone else on the call have questions for me?
That's outstanding. Not only is it vital to the point that you're saying, but I hope everyone heard on this call. There's a real effort happening in Upper Manhattan. We haven't always led in the census. And the idea that this community up here is taking this very seriously, we still got a long way to go. There's nothing to really celebrate having 50% of people, sort of getting this done. We need 100%. So but it's good news to know that we got the right people trying to get this done. And so I am going to ask some questions, Julie Menin, but I do want to quickly say thank you. Thank you for your vision. I remember when it was announced that you were going to take on this role, and I first said to myself, I thought she was going to run for vice president of the United States or president. I don't know why she's going to deal with a census. I mean, you got all the pedigree. So I thought, man, New York City is very lucky to have somebody like you that has all of this experience.
Thank you.
Because it turns out that you really have to have a little bit of a political savviness in this role, along with that, sort of ability to connect with a community. And that's not an easy thing for a lot of people. One can do one of the other. So, well, I guess the first question, do we want to use Raku? Do we have someone you were showing me? All right, there's a question. I have questions. All right. But I'm so down with the people online that I'm gonna say a question that someone submitted themselves. All right. Who'd this come from, Raku?
Wallace J.
Wallace J. And what's it say here?
It says, I was just talking to my friend, and a lot of people do not know how to complete it.
All right. So if you didn't hear Raku, soft-spoken, and I'm not. So the point is, a lot of people don't know how to fill out the 2020 is what one of the. I'm sorry. Walt, go ahead, Walt. Where are you?
Can you hear me? Oh,
I got you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. The thing is, I was just talking to my friend, and I asked him if he filled out the census, and he doesn't know where to fill it out. a lot of people need the URL to complete the census is a thing. If we can possibly advertise it more on social media or through Eventbrite or something like that, that would be a good thing. And
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Julie.
absolutely. I love that idea. So I'm going to have a member of my team, I believe Artie's on this call, or Nye, if they could put into the chat box right now.
Exactly.
First of all, the URL is my2020census.gov, but we have a whole social media toolkit that has all sorts of amazing graphics and images and content and things to push out on the census. So if someone on my team could put that into the chat box, that would be great, so that everyone has access to that. Because I agree, we want to make sure that everyone knows that. We're running digital ads all the time. We have a huge amount of digital ads that are out. I should mention right now, we're also running a contest where every week we're giving away $1,000 of free food delivery from Seamless. So this is a partnership we have with Seamless, the food delivery service. Every week, one person will win $1,000. We're running the contest for 10 weeks. All people need to do is fill the census out. So we have a whole social media toolkit on that people can push out. And once people email us the confirmation that they filled the census out, we enter them into the contest. So we've had 2 winners so far. We have 8 more to go. Super exciting. But that we can share that content as well.
I'm gonna have to resubmit my census to get that $1,000, man. Come on, that's amazing. That's really cool. Very cool incentive. So yeah, hopefully someone on the team, my team and your team, or both, will put something in the chat that everybody can copy, and so forth. Nye, if you're online, you can do that too. Put it in there. Let me go to one of my. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julie.
Oh no, the only other thing I'd say about filling out the census that a lot of people don't know. So some people will say, well, look, I didn't fill the census out because I lost the mailing, or I can't find the code that was in the mailing. Now, the code is a sense of like tremendous confusion. So the federal government, when they first mailed to you the form about the census, it tries to encourage you to fill the census out online. And it says, go to my2020census.gov and enter this computer code.
Right.
Big secret, you don't need the code. And in fact, we wish there was never a code. It was not our idea, it's the federal government's idea. But having the code only serves to confuse people, because then people say, well, wait a minute, I can't find that code. You don't need it. All you need to do is go to my2020census.gov. You put your name in, you put your address in, and you're done, and you can fill the census out. So I just want to mention that, because I think I have heard that there was a lot of confusion around that.
That is big. It confused me. I luckily had one. I was thinking to myself, what about people that may not have had that? I was actually thinking about that. So I'm so happy you sort of cleared that up. So let me go on. There's a lot of stuff going in the chat, which is good. And I'm going to get to a lot of it. So everyone who's putting stuff in the chat or Q&A,
Okay.
we're going to get to some of it. But I see David Bigelow is on. Oh, man, listen, there's some good people on this thing. All of them are going to be committed to getting 10 people signed up, Julie. So that's a good challenge.
Fabulous.
Can I ask Julie a question?
Who's asking?
David.
David Bigelow, be quick with it, my man, because I'm going to have to mute you.
Okay. Clayton, Bruce, I know you're hiding back there. So Julie, assuming you get, we're able to get a great increase, and you're up to, I don't make up a number, 75%, 80%, and at some point you max out. What, this is sort of the, what can we do to help you with presumably the assumptions that you make to, to show the census that we believe, statistically speaking, there is this many people undercounted. Like, how can we affect that?
So that's such a great question. I love that question. So first of all, yes, you're correct. Not everyone, you never get to 100%. Like, people say, oh, we need 100%. Look, we'd love to get to 100%, but the fact of the matter is there are always some people who do not fill the census out. So what happens in that situation? The federal government does something called imputation, where then they try to impute the people who have not filled the census out. That's really problematic. And it's problematic because their data that they're looking at is usually wrong. and it's not as accurate as someone self-responding. So I'll give you an example. In 2010, 1 million children under the age of 5 were left out of the census. They simply were not counted. And they were not counted because either you had the federal government going out and door knocking and trying to get people to fill the census out. And when that happens, it's not always as accurate because the door knocker might not reach someone. And so they might ask a neighbor, hey, how many people live in apartment 10A? And that neighbor might be like, I don't know, 1. And there could be 5 kids living in that unit. So that's the problem. Like, we don't want it to get to that point. So when you say, like, how could you help? The best way to help is get everyone to self-respond to the census, not let it get to the door knocking stage, not let it get to the imputation stage. So I'm sorry that was a really long answer, but it's such an important question, and I'm really glad that you asked it.
Well, these are the kind of questions that we don't always hear the answer to. So it's not a long explanation at all. It's the kind of information we need. And to follow up on that, I'll ask a question here, which is a little bit different, actually. Boy, there's a lot going on in our country, particularly around this movement of Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And that nature.
Right.
Does Census have anything connected to that, or anything that, implications around that?
Absolutely. I mean, the census is a civil rights issue, whether it's the history of the 3/5 compromise, whether you look back at the history of the census and the fact that it has been historically used as a tool of oppression. This is why, when people say, well, why is the census important? Well, the census is important because communities have been completely marginalized by the census. They've been overlooked. They've been under-resourced. The census is a fight for power and for resources. We're literally fighting for our fair share of over $650 billion. And so Black Lives Matter is so important at this moment. We need something actionable to take, and the census can be a huge part of that discussion. So I'm, really glad that you're asking that question, because we want to make sure that everyone understands of how this historically census has been used and how we now need to use it as a tool of positivity to make sure that our communities are counted and not under-resourced and not overlooked.
And by the way, everyone, happy Juneteenth. Okay, so we may not, let's not forget that, right? And some of us are free. We're free. All right, so anyway, what's happening? Let me ask a question, Julie Menin, which is not on any of these papers, so hopefully it won't throw too much off, but money-wise, right? Is it a scaling thing? Like, if we have 60% counted, makes a certain threshold, or is it a pure number of people in a state or in a city? How does it break down on a number basis?
So it's a great question. So I'll give you a couple examples. So New York State derives $74 billion a year in programs that relate to the census. For New York City, like, if you just take public education alone per year, we receive $1.5 billion a year in funds for public education. That's just for 1 year. As you said so well, the census is over 10 years. So again, you can really see the implications of this. So an undercount can have disastrous impacts fiscally for us. And also, after COVID, we need every dollar on the table. We can't have a situation where not just dollars, we're talking about billions of dollars could be left behind because people are not taking the 10 minutes it takes to fill this form out. So it has enormous implications. Over 300 programs depend on this. So I'll just give a couple examples. I mean, obviously, public education being first and foremost, hospitals. So I mentioned COVID. When you think about it, one day there will hopefully be a vaccine for COVID. The New York City Health Department looks at census data to determine when they're ordering vaccines. So, for example, when there was a measles outbreak in parts of the city last year, the health department looked at census data to say, well, how many children live here? How many vaccines do we need to order? This is not a time to be invisible. This is not a time to not be counted. So it has implications for that as well. But it also has implications for funding for Head Start, for senior centers, for job programs, for NYCHA. I mean, there's almost no issue that you could mention that is not linked to the census.
Oh, my goodness. this is almost scary listening, but it's also inspirational. We can do something about it. That's what's really cool. Like this is we can do something about this, and I love that. There's a real goal here. In that same sort of vein, I'm looking at a couple of questions here. I guess one of the ones that's most intriguing to me right now is timeline. What is the I know it's sort of basic, but
Yeah.
given COVID and all this other stuff, all kind of deadlines have been pushed, whether it's taxes, whether it's whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, is there any updates around that?
Yeah, good news is the census deadline has been extended from the summer to October 31st. This is really good news. We needed that time. The city asked for an extension. We got an extension. The whole country got an extension. And we in New York really need it because we were the epicenter of COVID. We were harder hit than anywhere else. We need to open these 300 pop-up centers. We need to have in-person contact with folks across the city who have not filled the census out. And so there's going to be no substitute for that. So the sooner that happens, the better. But having to October 31st is really going to make a difference to our efforts. So we're going to get there. And those that have not filled it out, we're going to be able to reach.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Let's get back to our community and the people on this call and what our soldiers can do out on the battlefield to make this happen. So all the ways that you can fill out the census, one of them is obviously digital. We've talked a little bit about that already. How else can one submit their census
Sure.
application?
So you can submit it. There's a toll-free phone number in 16 different languages. So, I mean, this is great. So, we think that that's really important that people understand. There's also the phone option, and then there's the mail option. The U.S. Census Bureau is about to send another mailer out. It should hit most mailboxes the first or second week of July. So there'll be another form that's sent out. So again, there are 3 ways to fill the census out: the paper form, by phone, or the going to my2020census.gov. And you can do any different way. Also, one question I'm asked all the time, I'll just mention, a lot of times people say to me, I'm not sure that I filled it out correctly, or I'm not sure. Like, if you're not sure, just fill it out again, because if there's a duplicate, they take that out. So it's better to be more conservative on that and on the safer side and just make sure it was completed. Or sometimes people will say, I'm not sure if a member of my household might have filled it out and because again, only one member of the household can fill it out.
Right. What are some of the myths around the census? We hear about stuff in Upper Manhattan. People feel like, they're just trying to, track me down, or they're, trying to figure out what I do every day. Like, what are some of the myths around the census?
Well, so let me say that perhaps the number one myth around the census is people say to me all the time, well, I'm not filling it out, just like what you said. Oh, I don't want the government having that information on me. Well, guess what? They have all that information. Okay, because let me tell you what the census asks. It does not ask social security number. It doesn't ask income. It doesn't ask bank information. It doesn't ask intrusive private information like that. What it does ask is your name, your address, your age, your gender, how many people live in your home, and do you rent or own your home? And then it asks race and ethnicity information. Now, let me also say, if someone's not comfortable answering a question, you can skip a question. The Federal Census Bureau will even indicate you can skip a question. We get that question a lot, particularly around the gender question, which is binary. Some people might say, you know what, I'm not comfortable answering that question. Well, you can then skip the question. You shouldn't skip more than one question, because then most likely you'll still get a knock on your door. And I should say the Federal Census Bureau is going to begin door knocking in New York City. August 11th is the plan for them to begin the door knocking. You only get a knock on your door if you didn't fill the census out. So what's the best way to avoid them knocking on your door? Fill the census out. If you fill it out only partially, you're probably going to get a knock on your door because it'll be viewed as an incomplete.
Wow.
I have a question.
Okay,
Sure.
introduce yourself.
Okay, I have a question. What are they doing about dealing with the homeless situation in New York City?
Yeah.
For these people to be counted, some of them are not like in shelters. Some of them are just really out in the street. They might have an address that they're utilizing. So what are they doing about that? Or how can we work along getting that population as well? Because they are in New York to be counted in the census.
Absolutely. It's a great question. So for the homeless that are living on the streets, there'll be several days that the U.S. Census Bureau does a count. They go out in the streets and they do a count. The city's obviously going to work with them very closely on that. That was supposed to happen. If COVID wouldn't have happened, that was supposed to happen in May, but obviously given COVID, that did not happen. So that will happen later on the summer. And there'll be 3 days where the U.S. Census Bureau goes out to the streets and does a count. In addition, for the shelter population, we worked on an agreement between the City Department of Social Services and the U.S. Census Bureau, where administrative data on every single person living in the shelter is given to the Census Bureau to make sure no one is overlooked. Because what happened in 2010, honestly, is that the U.S. Census Bureau would reach out to the administrator of this facility, and they sometimes reached out late, or sometimes they reached out to the wrong person. And so a lot of people were overlooked, and that's unacceptable. So we want to make sure that that didn't happen this time.
Julie, how does the census, if it does, impact our representatives, our electives?
Yeah, that's a great question. So census data is used for redistricting on the congressional lines. And like this stuff really, really matters, because we have to remember that in the mid 1950s, New York State had 43 members of Congress. Today we have 27. 27. And in an undercount, we might fall to 25, because it's slated that if we have a real undercount, we might lose 2 congressional seats statewide. So again, the census really matters. It also matters on the state and city council lines as well. So again, this is all about power. It's about resources. It's about respect. We cannot have a situation where people aren't filling it out, because if you're invisible, you lose representation at the congressional level, at the state level, at the city level, and you lose resources.
What are your boundaries? Like what is the census sort of geographic area that you're covering?
For our office, it's just the city of New York. So it's all 5 boroughs, the city of New York. So that's what our office covers. And I should say, like, our office didn't exist before. This is a new initiative. And really the reason why it was so important to have it in the wake of the citizenship question, our office was created while the case, was going on. We were fighting the case. And so we did not know which way that would go. Our office was also created because of the online census, because again, the federal government did not put the resources, quite frankly, that were needed for the online census. It wasn't fully beta tested. No one was really sure, is this going to work? How is it going to work? How many people are going to fill it out online? We didn't know how many problems there would be associated with that. So it was so important to have an initiative that organizes this. And so our office was created about 1.5 years ago. We have been working with 157 different community groups on the ground who are trusted voices in their neighborhood. We've been working with houses of worship. We've been working with civic associations, with elected officials, with community boards, all labor groups all across the city to really make sure that we get a count.
Does that include Staten Island?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. Sorry, everybody.
Staten Island actually has the highest self-response rate in the city right now, which was not the case in 2010. So they have the highest, followed by Manhattan, and then followed by the Bronx. The Bronx is almost going to take over Manhattan in terms of being number 2 in terms of self-response rate.
All right, we got to get on it. We got to stay on it. Take a question from somebody. Want to ask a question right now to Julie Menin? If not, I've got 1 or 2 more that I have.
Okay.
I'll give it a second here. Does anyone have a question? Bruce, do you have a question? Is Bruce Lincoln on? I'll unmute you if you want to ask a question or make a comment.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Hi, Julie. Thanks. This has been very informative.
Thank you.
But similarly, could you just further reinforce why it's so important?
Sure.
We really respond to this and overcome some of the issues that it has to do with access.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think perhaps maybe I could give an example. So, Clayton mentioned that I chaired Community Board 1 for 7 years. And so I was chair of CB1 when the census last happened in 2010. And I remember like it was yesterday that someone from the federal government came by and talked for a couple minutes in one of our sessions about the importance of the census. And basically their message was, fill the census out, it's a law, it's your civic duty, it's in the Constitution. And then they sat down. And everyone sort of droned. I mean, like no one paid any attention. But if that person from the federal government would have gone to the microphone and just said this, did you know if you don't fill the census out, that your local public schools will lose funding? And then sat down, we would have had a 90+ response rate in Lower Manhattan rather than what we did. So what I'm saying is the single best way to change the direction of any community in New York City, but particularly communities that have been left behind and that have been left out and haven't received their fair share. The single best way is to fill the census out. It's that simple. It's a national competition. So for every New Yorker that doesn't fill the census out, where does that money go? It goes to other states. And let me just be totally frank. Because of the battle around the citizenship question, we have a situation in New York where immigrant communities and communities of color are on the front lines of perhaps being undercounted. And we're seeing that in cities across the country. So where does that funding go? Where does that congressional representation go? It's going to red Republican districts across the country. That's what the census is about. It's literally a democratic fight for fair share. And we can't have a situation where once again, our city is left behind. And our city is going to need this funding after COVID more than ever.
I think I asked this before, but is it a number or a percentage that the government looks at? Is it saying a number or a percentage? Or
it's by person. So basically they look at the number of people. So let me give an example. Public school education. So again, I mentioned 1.5 billion. It's a per person allocation of how many people, how many students. Senior centers. So for those of us whose parents are using senior centers funding is based on, well, how many seniors are filling the census out? So if thousands, tens and tens of thousands of seniors are invisible and not filling it out, that's a problem for the funding. Or the example I gave before of 1 million children, and that's a nationwide, not a city number, a nationwide number, 1 million children under the age of 5 were left out of the census in 2010. That child who then is not eligible for Head Start funding, they're simply invisible. When that child enters into the school system, it is not until they're a sophomore. So if they were a kindergarten when they were overlooked, now suddenly they're a sophomore before they're starting to get that funding again. That's what the census is all about. And the amazing thing is for even people who are really civically engaged, who say like, I'm super involved, I'm civically engaged, I vote all the time, I'm so involved in the city of New York. The number of people I talk to who don't know that about the census or don't realize how much at stake, it's tremendous. That's, one of the many reasons we've had a low response rate. And the other problem, honestly, we have with COVID, we have so many problems regarding COVID, but another problem we have, and I just want to challenge everyone on this call, is I hear from people all the time who've been displaced because of COVID. Okay, they've been displaced and now we have to reach them. They might not have received their mailer, or maybe they're staying with their sister in an apartment and they're not getting that mailer. We need to reach them and tell them, you got to go online and you have to fill this out. It is that important.
Wow. So we're certainly going to get more money than Montana, right? So I got a question here on the chat here that says, how do we, and when we say how do we, I'm going to just jump in and say, how do we, as the folks on this call and the Silicon Harlem community in general, how do we help elders? As you mentioned already, but basically, how can we, just as a movement, try to help these people get their census in?
That is so important. Like, I think about my dad as an example. He has dementia. He's homebound. I obviously had to help him fill the census out. He wouldn't have filled it out otherwise. Like, we have to help our elders. We have to help the seniors in our community. We have to make a commitment to double down to make sure that they are not overlooked. So having everyone say, I'm going to think about every senior that I know in New York City, every single one. I'm going to call them. I'm going to help them fill the census out. I'm going to make sure that they fill it out. That's so important to make sure that that happens, because otherwise it won't happen.
How do you know, Julie Menin, how do you know the number of people in New York City? What databases are you using to determine what our goals are?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first of all, we have an amazing Department of City Planning demography department. They've done censuses every single time. And so they keep data on the number of people who reside in New York City. And they use all sorts of databases to determine that information. And if you speak to them, they will tell you point blank that if we let the census get to the door knocking stage, if we wait, because remember, it's not the city that's door knocking. Let me be clear. It's the federal government who sends out thousands and thousands of workers to go knock on the door. If we wait to let that happen, that is bad data for the city of New York, because again, it's how children are overlooked, seniors are overlooked. It's basically vulnerable communities that are overlooked. So we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that everyone self-responds to the census. But the reason we know how many people live in the city is based on all these data sets that the Department of City Planning, as well as the US Census Bureau looks. So the other thing I should say, without getting like overly wonky on this, but the US Census Bureau sends out something called the American Community Survey. It's sent to between 2 and 3% of people across the country. Many of you might have received it. It is a super long form with dozens and dozens of super intrusive questions. People hate it. They never want to fill it out. But that census gives the US Census Bureau more information to create these larger data sets. The census, let me be clear, that we're talking about is literally 10 simple questions, and there's not those kinds of intrusive questions on it. But our census is so important because it's about the funding and the representation that we've been discussing.
Another question that was on the chat was, I got to tell you, it seems to me, every person I've met that's working with you on this are excited and they have good energy, like Nye Whitaker and others that I've met. I mean, Nye worked for me for a little while, and I know her energy, but everyone I've been meeting have been like very excited and positive. And so there's been a question asked in the chat: are there any other? Can people still apply? You have your team built, so you don't need anybody else, whatever. But they're asking if there's opportunities to join up.
Look, we would love that. I mean, please contact us at nyc.gov/census. We would love that. We have an amazing team of people who are really dedicated and passionate about helping New York City and getting a proper count. So yes, we would love that. Please reach out to us. So there are also as well a lot of volunteer opportunities. So we do text banking and phone banking every single day. If you want to host a phone bank, if you want to host a text bank, our team sets everything up. It's super easy to do. We'd love to work with you. So if you want to volunteer with us, again, you just go to nyc.gov/census. There's so many opportunities to do so. And then the US Census Bureau is still hiring. So they still have a lot of open positions and they are hiring. So someone from my team can put in the job link there if people are interested in those jobs.
Outstanding.
And it's super helpful people apply to those jobs because, again, there's nothing like a trusted community leader to be helping to spread the message about the census. That didn't happen as much in 2010 because in 2010, the federal government had a contract where they brought in a lot of folks from other states to come knock on New Yorkers' doors. You know what? That doesn't work. Like, we need people within the community, neighbor to neighbor contact. That's so important.
How do you think this is going to ultimately impact startups and small business owners? We're finding that COVID has been devastating. We've lost some of our favorite locations here in Harlem, and there seems to be no stopping people losing their businesses. So how do you think will there be an impact on that moving forward in the future?
100%. So businesses use census data. When businesses are determining should they open up in this location versus that location, they're generally looking at census data to say, okay, this is how many people live in this community. This is the demographics that we need, all sorts of information. Like if it's say it's a daycare business, they need to know how many children are living in the community. I mean, census data is a tool for all these different decisions. So if the data isn't there, if large parts of communities are completely overlooked, that's going to affect businesses making the decision to open up a business in that neighborhood. So again, there are huge implications to that. We can't have that.
Okay. Well, that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye on too. And, it seems that people should be quite motivated around the fact that that's an economic engine in Upper Manhattan. We still have
Right.
far more mom and pops than we do big box businesses. So we want to see that continue to grow. And we're starting to see a rapid sort of acceleration of startups in Upper Manhattan. So we're very proud of that. And I'll talk about, after we get past some of this, I'll tell the audience on there's some where money is, where you can get some investment and all these other type of things, so that as you get this census data, you'll be able to set up a business with real information. That being said, as you look forward to the future, right? And when I say the future, by the October 31st date,
Right.
what would be you put a challenge on each of us to do 10
Yeah.
people, but what would the percentage you would like to see us hit by a certain milestone?
I get,
Not just
yeah.
us, New York City in general, but certainly Upper Manhattan.
It's such a great question. And I get asked all the time, like, what's the number? What's the metrics for success? And what I always like to say is, I just want to make sure every neighborhood in New York City beats their 2010 number. If we got every single community across the city of New York to beat their 2010 number, we would have a great result in New York City. And you can look at let me just say, the data is by census tract, which is about 3,000 people. So you can see the data in the neighborhood you live in. You can go to our website and we have maps. You can go to the US Census Bureau website. They have maps. I mean, there are a lot of maps on this, but if you go to our site, you can see we list every single neighborhood and how they fared in 2010. So you can see the number that we're asking every community to beat. And that, I think that's really, really important. We can get there and we will get there. And look, there's some communities like Co-op City is at 70%. Okay, so you've got some neighborhoods, Washington Heights and Inwood, in the high 60s. You've got communities that are far, far above the city average. Then you have others, unfortunately, in Corona and in Elmhurst that have been particularly hard hit by COVID that are lower than the city average. So it's just so important we get every neighborhood to beat the 2010 number, and that will result in a good result for the city.
That is a good challenge, and one that we accept, and we are definitely going to beat our number. I can tell you right now that's going to happen. We're all over it. Early on in the census movement, we set up like you said, a physical location where we brought a bunch of computers and we trained people that were working in the various community centers and made some good progress. People were really filling out the census. And then, like you said, COVID hit and it sort of disrupted every sort of idea everyone had. But we're back on track in terms of moving everything online and finding ways to help people who may not have that infrastructure to literally get it. But to your point, they can still call, they can use the tech. By the way, we have a tech service too, and we'd like to use that service to help with the census. There's a lot of people that are mobile only, unfortunately. So we decided to create a tech service of our own, and every day we send out something at 2:00. Anyone on this call that's not subscribing to our tech service, please do. Somebody type in the chat. Type this in, Raku, which is you're going to text the number 1 USA, and the number that you're texting to is 313131. So very easy to remember. By the way, with that text service, not only will you get a message every day, but you also can utilize that text service to find out where coronavirus cases are around the nation and around the world. So we're pulling on a variety of databases to provide that information, and you can even ask a question. My point, though, Julie, is we would love to be able to take some of the messaging you're using through whatever means, including text, and we'll add it to our rotation as well to make sure that more and more people are getting access to that information.
Thank you. That'd be great.
So now, what happens now? Like, what do we do tomorrow?
Yeah, right. So what would be great is if everyone on this call can literally go into their list of contacts on email and send an email, a blast email to every person in their contact list to ask them, have they filled the census out? If you want us to send you the language you can use, we can put that, Arthi, if you could put that in the chat box, we could give a sample letter, and you can, revise it as however you want, but it can have sample language that you can use with all the links of how you fill the census out. That would be a great first step. And then commit to posting something on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter. I should mention, we also are doing these great chat groups. So whether it's in WhatsApp or WeChat, we're using all these different apps where we've got community leaders having conversations about the census in these different chat groups. So we can also post information about that as well, because those are really, really resonating.
Oh, that's outstanding. I mean, well, listen, we know you're a superstar, so you're not missing anything. I'm just so happy that you're in this job. Anyone have a question for Julie? You can take yourself off mute. We're going to give her another 5 minutes before we'll have to let her go. She still has young people in the house and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to give her a break. But anyone have a pressing question that Julie can entertain? Otherwise, I'm going to start moving to my closing remarks and closing questions. But I want to open it up. So someone has something to say, I'm sure, because this is New York. Let me know. Anyone? Okay, that's you, Wandalyn. Go ahead. Did you want to say?
I have a question. I don't know. An idea just popped up in my mind. I was wondering, even though COVID is going up on now, but they're beginning to open up, going into like phase 2. Is there some kind of way you can think about having a census taker or having a partnership with something like, for instance, Whole Food stores, the Whole Food store that's up there in Harlem, in Harlem, 125th Street, whereby when people come in to shop or whatever, someone could be there and ask them if they set up, they filled out their census application. If not, having census applications there, or some kind of mobile way that they can have their iPads or something and have them just fill out their census application that way. I don't know. It just popped in my mind.
First of all, thank you for that question. It's a great idea. I should have mentioned one of the things we have been doing is at the approximately 500 DOE food distribution sites, we have census materials and we're tabling at some of those sites. But your idea is really great because, going where people are and making sure to let people know about the importance of the census is so important. We have a lot of posters that we have been giving to businesses and asking them to post it on the census, to start to see our team out as things open up much more and about at different events, tabling and trying to aid people to fill the census out. We had one group that we're partnering with, the JCC in Brooklyn, actually did a census drive-through where they got 600 people to do a drive-through on the census, and they got 600 families to fill the census out. So we've got a lot of different ways to do that. But the U.S. Census Bureau, I want to mention this, they have a whole team of people with iPads who are ready and available to come to events to help people fill the census out. They haven't been doing that in light of COVID, but soon I believe they're going to get the green light to be out like all over the city. So if you're having any kind of large scale event, let us know and we're happy to make the request to make sure that they have a very large presence at the event. But I love your idea on Whole Foods and we can definitely look into that.
And I'll build on that. And one of the things we have going for us right now, which would be very cool to do in a million different ways. So whoever is creative on this call, come up with some ideas. But we have, if you weren't on early, we have what's called smart thermometers. Fill out the census and get a thermometer. So we can add that to whatever incentivizing ways that people are doing this. I'm happy to supply as many of these as possible to get more and more people to fill out the census. So if you have an idea, if you have some way to get this distributed, I know that I've been connecting a little bit with some of the food banks who are giving people food every day. Why not give them a thermometer at the same time? So it's not only feed the stomach, but feed your life. So
That's right.
this is something that I would recommend for anyone who has an idea out there. If you have a a food bank, if you're helping out on one, send me a note. And Raku, put my email in the chat, and make sure you get in touch, because we want to get these out to people. I distributed 500 yesterday, so we can figure out ways to get this done. Julie Menin, I'm going to start getting towards a close. I'm seeing people still commenting, but I want to move along and really sort of get a summary here. I'm going to ask my last question, and I'm going to allow you to sort of give your summary, your wrap up, however
Sure.
you want the lasting thought for all of us to have. My final question, in this census, is there an impact, if you will, on or a profound impact in, like you mentioned early in this call, more and more people kept coming on. So some of this has to be reiterated. The term people of color or low-income communities or marginalized areas or vulnerable people, all these wonderful buzzwords to describe the inequality of this country. Can the census change some of that? Can the census literally bridge those or close those gaps that we see in health, that we see in education, that we see in economics and wealth? These gaps have been systemic, to your point, since the Emancipation Proclamation.
Right.
You know, this is not new. Happy Juneteenth, everyone, by the way. Juneteenth, we're all free, but there's a lot of still problems and systemic problems. If you can sort of wrap up some of your comments and address that in your own way, and we will be so happy.
Absolutely. It's such a great question. We know that there's obviously systemic racism, whether it's in the educational system, in the healthcare system, in so many institutions, and in institutions and issues that are affected by the census. So what do I mean by that? Well, we know that Black and Brown communities have historically been undercounted, have been underfunded, have been under-resourced, have lost out on both resources and political representation. The census is a way to help to address some of those inequities. The census is a way to make sure that communities that have been disenfranchised get the resources and political power that they so rightly deserve. So we can't have a situation that has historically faced the census where communities have been disenfranchised. The census is a way to start to address that. So that's why we've got to get the word out. We have to make sure that everyone understands that, and that understands that filling the census out is a way to make sure that their community gets the resources, whether it be for Head Start, whether it be for Title I funds for school, whether it be for senior centers, whether it be for, I could mention 300 programs that depend on the census. Medicaid, Medicaid, it is such an important program, and yet it is linked to the census. So if people aren't filling out, we're going to take an enormous hit in terms of funding for Medicaid. So this is why the census is important. And it's also, again, about congressional districting, about districting on the city council lines, the state lines, making sure that communities that have been left out are getting their fair share. That's what the census is about. It's really a fight for fair share.
Let me quickly say that, that's the kind of message we need. And I say that to everyone on this call. This is a call to duty. You cannot complain next year or the next 9 years after that if you're not putting in the effort, not only for yourself, but for your neighbors and for all of us here in New York City. It's unreasonable for us to be complaining if we don't do the right thing, which is within our own power, which is to make sure that we are counted. And so from there, Julie Menin, if we take on that responsibility and we're very diligent about getting that done, are we also bringing our voice to the city to say, hey, we did our part, make sure we're getting our piece of the pie. Is that a second wave that has to come through, or is it just happens because they see the data?
No, I think that's exactly right. You don't want a situation where anyone is invisible. And that's what the census is. It's like if you sit down and say, hey, I'm going to skip this, I'm just not going to be a part of this, then you become invisible to the whole system. And like, why at a time like this, we can't have that. And so this is why it's so important. And they're also, and I mentioned this before, and I just, I really feel like I got to say this again, is COVID. Okay, COVID also laid bare all the inequities and the fact that the inequities in our system. And so again, we have to make sure with COVID, one day there will be a vaccine. We can't have a situation where we don't know where people are in the city and where people are left behind. And then those inequities then are manifold and they keep on going and are perpetuated. So it's so important to just take the 10 minutes to fill it out, and then to go a step further, make sure that everyone takes the 10 minutes to fill the census out, because it's about actually owning this and taking responsibility, not just making sure that you fill it out yourself, but then taking the extra step. I mean, look, New York, whether it's New York City or New York State, has a very low voting turnout compared to other cities and other states. It's abysmal. So if we just look at voting data as one sort of touch point, it's really a bleak picture. So when we talk about the census, we don't want to then perpetuate those same problems. We want New York City to be at the front end of this, to make sure that New York City in this national competition, that we outpace other cities and other states.
Wow. Hey, you've said a lot tonight, and I think we might be wearing you out, but I'm just saying, like who do you right now have to report to? Like when you're talking about this in the government, like who are you talking to? Is it the mayor? Is it the federal? Like who are you talking to?
Well, obviously, as a city official, the mayor, who is obviously in charge in terms on the city side, I will say we have a very good relationship with the regional census bureau, because a lot of people said to me, well, wait a minute. You guys, I work for the law department. We sued the Trump administration on the citizenship question. We won. And so a lot of people said when I took this job, well, wait a minute, you sued, you won, but now you're going to work with the federal government. Well, yeah, of course we're going to work with the federal government. The federal government is the one that's doing the census. And I will say on the regional level, on the local level, the folks that we're working with really want to get a proper count. These are not people who are subscribed to Trump ideology or Trump appointees. These are people who've actually lived through many censuses. A lot of them were in the Obama administration working on the census. They just want to get a proper count. So we have built a very constructive relationship with the local U.S. Census Bureau, and we work with them all the time.
All right. We have taken as much time as we possibly could out of you. And I'm gonna wrap it up for you. Everyone else can stay online. We will talk a little bit more about sort of moving forward as a community. But Julie, any lasting thing you want us all to remember?
Well, Clayton, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this was a great discussion. I love these questions. They were really incredibly thoughtful and thought-provoking. And so thank you all for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for your commitment to the census. Thank you for your commitment to New York City. We really, really need it. And I think, and we kind of didn't touch on this, but it does strike me that at this time, like a lot of people think, so many things seem outside of their control. So many things, like particularly, I will say with COVID, a lot of people feel helpless, or they feel that things are happening that they can't really control. But there's actually one thing you can control, and that's filling the census out. It is the single best way to help New York City in perhaps its greatest time of need.
Wow. Well, again, we'll vote for you for President of the United States whenever you're ready. We got you.
Clayton, thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
You're very welcome. Give her a big thumbs up, everybody. We're going to let her go, and we're all going to wave and say bye. But thank you, Julie, really. Thank you very much, and we'll keep this going. We'll have you back.
That's great. Thanks, everyone.
All right. On another note, everybody, Boy, whew. Good questions, Wandalyn. You were like putting some nice pressure there. I like that. But I told you, Julie is not scared of nobody, boy. She's definitely a New Yorker. Anyone have any comment, questions, whether it's the census, whether it's the smart thermometers, whether it's our computers, whether it's, Upper Manhattan in general? Anybody have anything? Wandalyn, you have anything? Or Eric or Wallace or anybody? Bruce, anyone?
Yeah, just to share with everybody, I have, like I said, if you needed help, I started the meeting late, but if you need help with IT support, I've been trying to help people in the community understand basic resume writing, tech support, because I attended your tech seminar before the COVID with small businesses, and a lot of people that have small businesses need IT support, and I'm willing to offer my services to help people and my partners as well, to help people set up, if they need printers set up, routers, Wi-Fi, whatever. I'd be happy to do that for you guys.
Oh, that's awesome. And that is needed. Let me tell you, it's needed. You got my, I think you've sent me an email before, obviously, but you have you have my email there. Send me another email tomorrow morning so I can get that plugged in.
Okay, let me just pull that up. You sent it in the chat, sir?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Okay, copy. Let me get it right now.
So that's awesome because so many people are definitely going to want to connect with you on that. Anyone else want to make a comment? I'm going to start wrapping up the call here, but I just wanted to make sure everyone got their voice to the table. One of the things I do want to mention, I got to look at it on my phone, but basically there's a group that's put together some investment money, and they're looking at funding, or at least working with some small business owners and startups and things of that nature. So I'll try to give you the actual information. But these are the things that we want to sort of share all the time is, where are the resources? We all have great ideas, but where are the resources? That's what we need more than ever right now. And I think, this is the right time for those who can put together a fund should look at places like Upper Manhattan where there's tremendous opportunity. So that being said, Eric Cunningham, you got anything to say to the audience while I'm looking up this stuff?
I thought the
Maybe even the Uptown space and stuff like that.
I thought the tech talk was tremendous. I thought that the information was concise and important on what we have to deliver and how we have to deliver, because you made a joke about Montana, but I would not laugh too hard because Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota are getting their numbers done. So we have to make sure that we get our numbers done. We have Uptown Space, which is our shared working facility that we are in the process of reopening in the phase 2, and we would love to have new members join us. Feel free, Raku can put my email in. You can email me. I can get you the information as quickly as possible, and we can get you signed up and assign a space. So we would love to have more members in and more people committed to the Uptown New York infrastructure.
Excellent. So the investment that I mentioned, it starts from, and we will send this out. I'll probably have to send this out as a follow-up email to everyone on the call. But essentially, it's the Future of Work Grand Challenge, and it's called the Strategic Communications Toolkit. And the Future of Work Grand Challenge will identify and accelerate solutions that prepare millions of workers for immediate and long-term success in the American economy. So this group is doing some interesting work. They're getting most of their resources from a foundation called X Prize, as well as MIT Solve. And so there's an application, there's a way to get involved in this. We will post this entire thing to everyone, but it's a very long thing. So I will have Raku get this out to everyone tonight or tomorrow morning, and we'll hopefully get some people right out of Harlem into this program. So we're excited about that. Anything else that anyone wants to share? opportunity, challenges, all that kind of good stuff. We still need people, and a lot of you have volunteered. Well, now you can really kick in. We've got these thermometers we want to get, sort of distributed all over the city, starting in Harlem. But, definitely we want this distributed all over the city. So if you have outlets you think make sense, we have the product.
I'll
Gwendolyn,
email
you gonna
you.
say something?
I'll email you.
Okay, wonderful.
I'll email you.
I look forward to it. Anyone else on the call? If not, we're going to start to bring this piece to a close. I don't want to miss anybody, but I think we're there. Raku, how many other people are left on the call? Oh, we still got a pretty good audience of people. If you got something to say it. Don't be shy around here.
Hey, this is Liliana Pena, and I just want to say thank you so much to Silicon Harlem. You guys are awesome, amazing. Your work is outstanding, and I just honestly cannot wait to connect again with you guys and see what really we can do for this future. I have 3 boys, and I'm looking at you guys always, and thinking of you guys as a company. You guys are amazing, and I'm just honestly excited. I really don't care what's going on in our life right now. I'm really excited about what we as a people can do and have always done, whether it has been put out there or not. I am very excited, and I put my email on the chat. I'm just excited, very excited.
Well, I am too, and you mentioned your 3 boys. Make sure we get connected with them too, because I'm passionate about making sure that we, can share some insight with some of our young folks and young guys. And so to the extent that I can connect with them, let me know. I would love to share some insight that, might be helpful. Almost, I would say 100% of young people that have come through our programs, 100% that have come through our educational programs have all gone to college. That's a pretty good hit. That's a pretty good thing. And I'm not saying everyone has to go to college, but I definitely believe that your opportunities are opened up, the more you get access and exposure. And that's what we try to do every day with the people that we touch. Thanks, Lillian. Any other comments or suggestions or challenges that people might be having?
Okay.
Take yourself off mute if you have something to say. Challenger, you had something to say at one point. I'm going to unmute. Okay. Who's this? Daryl, you got anything? Okay, no problem. James, anything? I'm just randomly taking people. All right. Well, listen. Is Wilkie on? You got to be kidding me. Is Wilkie on?
Yes, I'm on.
Whoa! Wilkie, my man. If you don't know who Wilkie is, look him up. He's the man. He's helping kids all over this city, utilizing the great sport of basketball to help these young people figure out their lives, and they get to play ball all at the same time. Wilkie was a great ball player himself, and he surrounded himself with all these great people. And he's a great member of Silicon Harlem in our uptown space. So glad you were able to get on, Wilkie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the information.
Anyone else at this point? I'm going to start ending the call here. I think we've exhausted ourselves. We will be having another tech talk in another month and a half or so. We'll keep everybody on board on that. And we actually have a couple of events coming up. Make sure you have put a save the date for October 16th, 2020. It will be a physical conference. Yes, it's not going to be virtual unless we're told we have to. But right now, we are going to be at the brand new campus of Columbia University on 125th and Broadway. in which we are having our 7th year of a tech conference in Harlem, our 7th year, a tech conference in Harlem. And the theme, which we announced last year, all right, not the last couple of months. Back in November, December, we actually announced the theme for our 2020 conference. And that theme is advancing humanity. Isn't that apropos now? It's like, geez Louise. Advancing humanity is going to be our theme for 2020. I want everyone to be there. And if you're on this call, I'm going to say something. My team is going to be very upset at me. But if you're on this call and you have a wish to come to this conference, which normally has a registration fee, you email me directly with the code, not the code, but with the idea of saying, I'd like to be at this conference that you're having, your 7th year conference on October 16th, 2020. I want to be there. I'm going to let you in free. That's the offer I'm making only for those who stayed on this call this long. So you have that challenge. It's wide open, free for those who are on this call. I probably will never make this offer again the rest of the year, but I want to make it right now because so many of you now have a challenge to get people signed up to the census. You've heard all about the things that are going on in Silicon Harlem, and I just think we're a really good, we have a really good opportunity to bring Harlem at the forefront of everything New York City in general, along with Upper Manhattan and everything else. Email me, refer to the Zoom call, you get in free. That's a pretty good deal. That's a couple $100 that you save. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Jolie is probably telling me, hey, by the way, that's going out on your stream on YouTube and Facebook and everybody else. Well, what the hell, all right? We're going to make sure that whoever gets the first 20 people, no, I'm kidding. Anyone who comes on through this will get that if I get that email within 24 hours. Let's say that, Jolie. Within 24 hours, if I get that email, you're in. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This has been just a wonderful tech talk. More to come. Thank you. We're going to say goodbyes, farewell, and adios.